Welcome to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast, which shares the stories, insights and people involved in the Scottish red meat sector. In this series, we will speak to farmers, vets, advisors, processors, researchers, hauliers, marts, butchers and retailers, as well as to the fabulous team at Quality Meat Scotland. I'm your host, Jane Craigie, and I'm looking forward to telling the stories that matter about the iconic quality livestock of Scotland and the people that produce, process and retail Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork. This episode centres on QMS's 5-year strategy, launched at the 2023 Royal Highlands Show by Sarah Millar, QMS's CEO, and its chair, Kate Rowell. One farmer said to me, and I quote, "QMS has been under fire, so the strategy is needed." And Kate and Sarah's launch was phenomenal. It gave me goosebumps to stand up for the industry and to be proud. The delivery plan aims to make Scotland the choice for premium red meat across the world by developing Scotland's red meat sector through driving demand from consumers who recognise the brands as marks of integrity, provenance and with sustainability at its core. I caught up with Sarah and Kate to ask them to explain more about the strategy and, importantly, how it will be implemented. I also quizzed them about their industry engagement, which has spanned months, incorporated miles of travel and hours of conversations all over Scotland. Have a listen to what they had to say. So Sarah, you've just launched your 5-year strategy. Could you just outline what your vision is over the next 5 years and what the pillars are for the strategy?
Yeah, so we were really excited to launch our strategy, and this has been the accumulation of 6 months' work for the QMS board and the QMS staff team. So the vision that we outlined is to make Scotland the choice for premium red meat, a really bold, simple vision that we're really excited to be getting down to work to deliver. And that vision is underpinned by 3 key pillars: provenance, profitability and productivity, and planet and place. And underpinning all of that is what I would say is our biggest asset, and that's people, because we're very conscious that in the Scottish red meat supply chain, people both internally at QMS but also externally across the supply chain are the people and the thing that makes the industry come together and will enable us to deliver on this ambition that we've set out.
And Sarah, you've placed a lot of importance on the integrity of our red meat sector and the fact that the meat should be from animals that are born, reared and processed in Scotland. Why is that still so important for the strategy that you've revealed?
I think for us, red meat isn't just about manufacturing a food product. Red meat production in Scotland is about our society and our communities and the businesses and the people that drive those communities. It's about management of our landscape and our climate change ambitions. And it's about businesses being able to make profitable decisions for the benefit of the country. And to do that, we have to have integrity. And the bottom line of that integrity is the provenance that all of this activity takes place in Scotland. We undertake this so that we are benefiting Scotland as part of that wider economic ambition. And I think that for me is really important. We've got a long history of supporting innovation and around that provenance area. And that's part of what we've set out over the next 5 years. We know we need to evolve again to strengthen those provenance credentials, because other people are now looking at what we're doing and going, we want a bit of that. So to continue to lead from the front, we need to invest in what comes next.
And Sarah, if we fast forward 5 years, when we see the brands Scotch beef, Scotch lamb, specially selected pork, what reputation, attributes and stories do you hope that will be synonymous with those brands?
So I would hope that those brands, if they don't already, have a really strong reputation for being at the forefront of sustainable farming and sustainable supply chain, so that people automatically think Scotland, that's good for the climate, that's good for nature. That's the first thing. I think in terms of the stories, for me, it's always going to be about the generations that come within each of the businesses in our supply chain, whether it's family businesses within our butchers and in our auction markets and in our processors, or the multi-generations on our family farm that have continued to invest and continue to produce livestock for our supply chain. And what's really important to me, as I outlined at the launch, was the future, and those future generations being given a chance to continue to produce great quality Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork.
And Kate, what changes do you envisage we'll have to make over the coming 5 years to reach the point that you would hope for?
Well, at QMS, the big change that we're going to make is we are going to be even more focused and more ambitious to try and achieve this vision to become the choice for premium red meat. We are very keen to tackle the big projects that are going to make such a huge difference, we hope, to the sector. There is always the danger when you're running an organisation of trying to do too many things and having too many irons in the fire and not focusing on the things that can really make a difference. And that is what we plan to do in the next 5 years, is really focus on the big ticket items that can make a difference for the whole red meat sector in Scotland.
And Kate, at the launch of this vision, you said in the foreword that you see red meat producers gearing up from other countries to compete with Scotland. Where do you see this competition coming from, and how do you think our brands will protect us from that incoming competition?
Well, the competition is coming from everywhere. You know, there are old trade agreements, there are new trade agreements being signed all the time. We have to be ready to tackle that, really. And we need to make sure that in Scotland we have got the upper hand in that, and that we are first and foremost in consumers' minds when they go to make their choices on the shelves. You know, we have an absolutely enormous advantage. We have Scotland. We are the ideal place to be producing red meat. We have the fantastic environment. We have the skills and the traditions stretching back over generations, as Sarah said. We've got the fantastic stock. We've got the great story to tell about our circular economy, the way that we all work together as a whole sector, not just the red meat sector, but the whole agricultural sector in general works together to provide that circular economy. And we have that brilliant community that we all know is out there, you know, the farming community, where we're all out there and we have each other's backs and we help each other whenever we can. So we need to make sure that consumers, when they stand in front of a supermarket shelf, or they stand at the butcher's counter, or they're sitting in a restaurant and they have a choice of where to get their red meat from, we need to make sure that it is first and foremost in their head, all those different points that I've just said, so that they choose Scotch beef, Scotch lamb or specially selected pork whenever they are able to. And we also have to work with government and with others in the sector to make sure that they also understand the benefits of the red meat sector in Scotland.
Yeah, and one of the things you covered in the plan, which I thought was really, really good to see, is the point about retailers and processors, and your plan to do more with processors, to perhaps co-develop ideas and products. How do you think working with those partners in the chain will help, A, the supply of Scotch onto shelves, but also B, what kind of new products and services might we expect from the red meat sector in the future?
So I think the key thing for me, and I always say that where QMS works best, is when we are looking ahead and when we are working for the future. So quite often businesses in the supply chain, particularly over the last few years when we have faced such disruption, whether it's been from the COVID pandemic or from EU exit, have had their noses to the floor, and it has just been about getting product out the door and servicing the customers that they have. So where we can come in is doing that horizon scanning, that pre-competitive horizon scanning piece, and saying, okay, these are the big ticket items that you need to be looking at in 10 years' time, and then working to make sure that when the opportunity arises, they are better able to take up the opportunities, whether it's about new markets, whether it's about new product innovations, or whether it's about things like robotics and AI. We can do a lot of that future-proofing that then makes it easier and quicker for businesses in the supply chain to uptake new ideas and new technology. And I think that's what's really important about, we're trying to help support businesses right along the supply chain, help service themselves for tomorrow.
In terms of export, as well as developing the domestic uptake and stocking of Scotch on shelves, where do you see the opportunities coming in the future? You've been doing a lot of outreach work internationally. Where are you hearing some positive noises, and how does that build on what we're doing already?
So I think for us, there's two key areas. One is definitely high-end food service across the world. We know that as meat consumption changes and that global consumer base becomes, particularly in the Western nations, become increasingly more affluent, that's where they look to pick up our products, and they are looking to pick the premium products as a sign of their wealth. So there's definitely opportunities for us, and for the volumes that we are producing, high-end food service is definitely the way to try and premiumise the products that we have going in there. The second area is, I suppose it comes down to how we as domestic consumers are eating our food, and I definitely see more opportunities in ready to eat manufacturing, particularly for our pork sector, and I think some of those added value products are where we have under indexed in the past, and there's potentially more opportunities to think about how we enable consumption for busy families that isn't that traditional fresh product. This will be an absolutely massive role for fresh product, but added value and adding more value, there's definitely opportunities there for Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork.
A point about quality assurance, that is absolutely at the heart of this, isn't it? We need to have products that consumers know is going to be consistent, they know is going to be high quality, and they know has an embedded story in it of traceability, provenance, innovation, whatever that might be. Why do you think quality assurance is so important, and why is it going to be as important in the future to consumers?
So obviously quality assurance is something that's been around in Scotland for a long time, and I think it is something that consumers have come to expect. I think consumers at the minute are torn. They're being made to feel guilty about what they eat. It doesn't matter what it is, but with particular regard to red meat, they're under pressure to feel guilty. So they're under pressure because of human health. People are telling them it's not good for them. They're under pressure because of climate change and things like animal welfare. So what we want to do is we want to reassure consumers that when they buy a Scotch or a specially selected product, they can be absolutely guaranteed that the animal welfare is as high as it can be. We're known for that in Scotland. We want to be able to reassure them that they are not harming the planet when they choose Scotch or special selected. And we want to reassure them that it's not going to be bad for their health. There's a huge amount of science out there that says that red meat is very good for you as part of a healthy, balanced diet. So to me, they want to eat red meat, they just don't want to feel guilty. So the integrity of our assurance schemes, which are independently verified, can take that guilt away. They can be assured that they're not going to be committing any of those so-called crimes if they choose our product, which might not be the case if they don't know what the provenance is, whether it's been looked after properly or anything like that. So the assurance schemes are completely fundamental to the integrity of the whole system, and that just guarantees consumers they're doing the right thing.
This plan ties in so well with the meat eating quality study that you issued, which is a really, really comprehensive overview of what consumers want, what they might want in the future, and how we might need to change what we do in Scotland to meet those consumer needs and asks. Sarah, how does that study tie in with this 5-year vision that you have for Quality Meat Scotland?
So this piece of work really fits in two areas. We're very conscious that there's a lot of demands being placed on farmers at the moment, particularly around climate change and nature restoration. And one of the things that we were conscious of as a board is that, quality is in our name, Quality Meat Scotland. And we wanted to ensure that we as an organisation prioritise quality in that decision-making process that producers will have to go through, because it would not be right if we lost our ability to produce quality Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork. So we wanted to do a piece of work that really gave us the evidence base and that compass for the future in terms of the changes that the supply chain will need to look at making to ensure we can retain that quality in a raft of a whole host of other decisions that are being made. The other piece is, again, going back to consumers. We know that globally consumers are going to change how they consume red meat in the future, and that increased competition, again, coming both into our markets and going into other markets, means that we need to make sure that we've got a really strong defined USP. We can't just say, actually, our beef's the best. We need to be able to give that value and that almost guarantee that what you say is what you're going to get. And similarly, it has to all be tied back, as I just mentioned, to about how producers along the supply chain make decisions. So for me, that piece of work was a really big statement to say, this is a priority for us, because it's going to be a priority for everyone in the supply chain as we look to the future. And really, again, I spoke earlier about how this had been a 6-month piece of work to really develop the strategy, but it's probably been, some of these pillars, that meat eating quality in particular, started about 18 months ago. So, bringing it all together under one strategic direction with our new vision around making Scotland the choice for premium red meat means that we've got the drive, ambition and determination across both the QMS staff team and the board and our wider supply chain to really go out there and make it happen.
I think that's so important to make sure that we've got a product that we can, stand up and be counted for and that is in demand the world over. I suppose farmers might be asking, well, what's in this for me? And you're an important partner, a really important partner to livestock farmers in Scotland. How do you envisage the future? Nobody can crystal ball gaze, but the elements that you've outlined in this do point to increased price potentially, increased value in the market, and hopefully increased profitability. How do the changes that you envisage, how might they play out into farmers' pockets?
So I think one of the things that I would say is that, and it's one of the biggest challenges we have at QMS, is we don't control the price. We can't control the price. We can't control over profitability. But what we can do as an organisation is identify the factors that influence profitability, whether it's around cost or whether it's around what products can access a higher price point in the market. And that's what our work really looks to do. And one of the big challenges we've faced over the last 24 months in particular is volatility. Now, we saw the volatility just over 12 months ago when Russia invaded Ukraine in terms of our cost base increasing absolutely out of control overnight, just about. And that created a lot of angst and a lot of worry. We've since seen the beef price and the pork price rise quite considerably year on year. But in terms of the margin has probably stayed relatively static. So part of what we're looking to do with this work is create points of resilience, because we know that climate change is going to destabilise the world's weather climate and will have an impact on how commodities, including fertiliser, is produced, in terms of how world grain products are produced and how world grain flows around the global food system. And although these things are happening quite far from our shores, ultimately they feed back into the cost structures that we have here in Scotland. So the more resilience that we can build in to both pricing and also to cost structures will help to create better margin opportunities for farmers, because for me that's what's important. It's that profitability margins. And whilst I would love to be able to control beef price, pig price, lamb price going forward, it's not within my gift. But I think what is within our gift is like say those points around resilience.
I suppose at the other end of the chain as well, the farmer end of it, we do have the tools to help with knowledge transfer, and things like our Monitor Farm programme are really, really important in that, in helping to disseminate information, but also allow farmers to speak to each other and learn from each other and pass on knowledge as things progress, as policy develops, as new ideas come in. Things like the Monitor Farm programme and the other knowledge transfer work that we do are of increasing importance. I know that myself as a previous monitor farmer, how much not only I got out of the whole programme, but how much the whole group and the whole area got out of it, and the way that we were able to bounce ideas off each other, think about putting new ideas into practice, and just generally helping to develop our businesses.
That's exactly where I was going next, Kate, to ask about Monitor Farms and to ask about wider industry collaboration. You have some of the best links into the whole supply chain of any organisation in Scotland, really, as far as livestock is concerned, because you're focused on livestock. Where would you say the relationship is for you and for livestock producers with retailers and processors?
So this is something that we've put quite a bit of work into over the last 12 to 18 months. And a part of that is around formalising our engagement structures. So what I would say is something that we've prioritised over the last 12 months is engagement. And I always say there's a big difference between engagement and communication, because communication is talking directly at people with a message. Engagement is that genuine collaboration. And we engage in a number of different ways right across the supply chain. At the heart of it, we have the Scottish Red Meat Resilience Group, which Kate chairs, which has all the key stakeholders coming together to talk about the big ticket items. So at our last meeting, we had an executive from Edinburgh City Council. They're talking about the plant-based treaty. We've produced position papers on skills and education, public procurement and net zero. And that for me is the key forum for, saying we need to come together. We need to talk about the big ticket items and actually make some progress on them without getting into some of the challenges around day-to-day issues. So that I'd say is the key forum for us. In terms of our wider stakeholders, across the team, we're engaging with retailers at many different levels, right the way across both the Scottish and UK supply chain. The reason my voice is so hoarse is because we did our lives at the Highland Show were literally split into half-hour slots. between retailers, processors, independent butchers as well, really important channel for us. And for us, it's really important to be on the ground, sitting down face to face and showing them. I'm a great believer in that seeing is believing, and we have a fantastic story to tell. So all we can do to get processors and retailers out onto farms or out into wholesalers to show exactly, that we mean what we say we mean is really important to us. And our most important stakeholders as well are that supply chain, from farmers, crofters, auctioneers, hauliers, butchers, processors. It's really important to us that we get out regularly to meet members of our supply chain on the ground. So last year we did our roadshow in the spring and summer. This year we're going to be going out in the autumn months to do another roadshow to make sure we can continue that engagement. But we've also done a number of different initiatives with specific parts of the supply chain. Again, for example, last summer our brands integrity team spent weeks up in the Highlands and Islands engaging with crofters specifically on health planning, because we heard that was an issue that they were particularly concerned about. So that engagement is really important and will be a much bigger feature of our implementation of the new strategy going forward. And part of the delivery mechanisms that we're now talking about will involve, changes to how we deliver this activity, including being, like I say, engagement being the new word rather than just communication.
You've touched on some of the shared challenges that everybody in the supply chain has. We've all got to reduce carbon footprint, and that shared challenge also brings opportunity to collaborate, doesn't it? In terms of innovation, I know you touch on it a lot, both in the meat eating quality study, but also your 5-year vision. How much more do you think you'll be doing in terms of engagement with farmers on the ground about technical aspects of their business, i.e. the application of AI or improvement in animal health and welfare? You do a lot of that already. Are there any plans to increase that or to change that in any way?
So in short, yes. And one of the things that we've been looking at in terms of our delivery is how we can better deliver for the entire supply chain. Because at the moment we have projects that generally sit with farmers, or they sit with processors, or they sit with wholesalers. One of the things that we're looking to do is have much bigger cross supply chain projects. Because one of the things that I'm really keen on is that we evolve and develop as a supply chain as one. So a really nice example of that is our net zero and nature restoration roadmap, which we'll be releasing later on this year. And the team are probably sick of hearing this from me, but I keep saying to them that this is a supply chain wide project. Whether you're a farmer, whether you're a butcher, whether you're a processor, whether you're a haulier, whether you're an auction market, there will be something of relevance to you in this, because I don't want any one part of the supply chain feeling that these challenges are all on their shoulders. Things like climate change need to be tackled as one supply chain. One of the intricacies we have in the red meat sector is that what impacts farmers will also impact processors or hauliers, and vice versa. So we need to be looking at these challenges as a supply chain and not in silos. One of the pieces around delivery on this strategy will be about breaking down some of those silos and making sure that we are taking a genuine supply chain approach to our solution building.
And Sarah mentioned the Red Meat Resilience Group there. It has been a really key part of all this. We did speak to everybody in it to help develop this strategy. And it is I hesitate to say new, but it is a really key platform for everybody in the supply chain to have a voice. We have in there everybody from farmers right through auctioneers, the feed supply chain, we've got butchers, we've got processors, crofters. Everybody in the supply chain is represented, and what it allows us to do is speak with one voice for the red meat sector to anyone who will listen, really, to government, to local authorities, to NGOs, to the education sector or the media, and I suppose ultimately to the public. And it means that people want to hear what the red meat sector thinks of something. We have a mechanism to do that, and it's taken a while to develop because everybody has competing interests in that supply chain. But what we're trying to do is improve the communication between all those parts and work far more in collaboration and, as I say, speaking with one voice.
The two of you have spent so many hours and travelled so many hours and been so open to the industry. And I know you've had some challenging conversations, but also some uplifting conversations that give you great hope. And I personally really thank the pair of you for spending that time, because it's so important, that point on engagement, Sarah. You can't make change, you can't improve things without engaging. What are your asks of the industry going forward over the next 5 years? And I'll ask you, Sarah, first.
I think the key thing for me, and it came through in Kate's speech at the Highland Show, is I want us all to get behind the same direction. Sometimes I think, it sometimes feels like we're in a very lonely place at QMS. And my ambition is that actually it's not a lonely place. And, we have 50,000 people working in our supply chain. Can you imagine the strength of that voice if we all got going in the same direction? And if everyone asked, how can I help deliver this? That would be transformational, and that could really lift what we do as an industry and put us not just on the front foot, but I genuinely think it could reap real tangible commercial benefits. So I think that for me is the big ambition and would be my biggest ask, and I've always said, my door's always open, whether people want to text me, phone me, grab me at a show. I'm here to listen. And if there are problems that people think that we are not listening to or have missed, don't be afraid to let us know about them, because that is the only way that we will evolve and that we will get this right for people. And there will be some hard conversations along the way. Again, as Kate said on last Friday, there should be. This is a tough ask, and I did say that we are being relentlessly ambitious with this, but the future wouldn't forgive us if we didn't, and I keep thinking, if I'm looking back in 20 years' time, how will I judge myself on what I did right now? And I think for me, it's about being really bold and ambitious and saying, do you know what? We gave it absolutely everything we had.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that. Speak to us, because we are listening. We often hear or see things where people say QMS in their ivory tower. We are certainly not in an ivory tower. I am just a farmer, like every other farmer levy payer out there. I'm just a farmer. I'm here to listen when people have got issues. It would also be nice to hear when people think that we're doing something right, because that does give us all a lot of confidence that we're moving in the right direction. I'm fond of saying that if we all work together, we can achieve great things. We have 50,000 people who are supported by the red meat sector in Scotland. Now, if everybody was able to give up just an hour of their time once a year, an hour a year, and that would be either speaking to children, speaking to the public, writing to your counsellor if you disagree with something, sharing things on social media, just speaking to a friend, having dinner with them, or down the street. If everybody could do an hour of that, and we provide the materials to give people the knowledge to do that, then that would result in us having 4 QMSs out there doing the work. So we can provide a lot of that backing. And if people in the sector can just put that little bit of time in, we could make so much difference. When we're disagreeing amongst ourselves, what we're doing is we're just letting those outside get their foot in the door. We go abroad to trade shows, and there are lots of countries out there who do it so well. For example, countries like Ireland are just out there shouting about how brilliant they are. Now, I'm not saying they don't have their disagreements at home, but when we put on a united front, we can do so much more. And we just don't want to waste time and energy fighting amongst ourselves when we should be out there speaking with one voice and saying how fantastic Scotland is and how we are the choice for premium red meat across the world.
Really nicely put, Kate. I couldn't agree more. May I be so bold as a communicator to add probably 2 other things that I think are important in feedback in any dialogue. And one is to be constructive. It can be critical, but it needs to be constructive. And the other is come up with ideas. You're a small team, you work incredibly hard. You can't come up with all of the ideas. That's why the engagement and the collaboration is so important.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Jane. Solutions is what we're here to do. And I regularly tell my team I'm always looking for solutions. And there's never anything that is too out of the box, too barmy. The challenges that we're facing, particularly around climate, particularly around some of the wider geopolitical issues, there's not solutions that have already been used that we'll be using in the future. We are really needing fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. And I think that's really healthy. and encouraging people and enabling people to come forward with those fresh perspectives is something that we're really keen to do as part of the new strategy as well. It goes into that, building our people both inside and outside the staff team.
My thanks to both Sarah and Kate. Their call to the sector is loud and clear. If 50,000 people in the red meat supply chain work together, pointing in the same direction, it could be transformational. Thank you for listening to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. To download a copy of the 5-year strategy, go to the QMS website. You'll also find the latest industry news and links to listen back to previous episodes of this podcast. And for recipe inspirations, go to www.scotchkitchen.com or follow Scotch Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. Thank you for listening.